related but unrelated, but like you go to a place that's at sea level, and you can feel the difference of the amount you're breathing in. You know,
for sure. Yeah.
Except when I go to sea level, I forget that I'm chubby for a little bit. But
because you feel awesome,
because I feel fantastic, and I can hike and I can run with friends,
and I have friends also.
And I have friends, and they're there.
People like me.
Welcome.
Oh, here we go.
Welcome to the Low Grade Research Podcast.
How are you, pal? Fantastic. This is our official first recording of 2025.
Yeah, it is.
How do you feel?
Really excited.
Yeah, that's good.
We've made it through the year.
Yeah, we have made it through the year.
No one thought we would.
Yep. Our poor listeners are going to get this a little bit after because I've been taking a break.
Hiatus, if you will.
Recording.
Not a hiatus, just a break.
Well, I don't know, maybe one or the other. My wife and I had a little baby.
That's so fantastic.
Yeah, so it's been great. So we've been sleep deprived and trying to navigate that. Thankfully, we both get parental leave off from work, so it's been like we just have got tons of concentrated time with the baby and with my son. So it's been a lot of fun, actually.
That's really great.
Yeah. So now, though, we're back ready to get in the swing of things, ready to like hit the new year and get after some stuff. And part of that is the old pod.
Getting back to regular recordings because we got listeners and they want our content.
Yep, all 10 listeners want the content, which is up from last year. I think we had 2. So
it's true. Thanks, Mom.
If we keep on this trajectory, I mean, this could be a viable career option in 40 years.
Listen, if we can get those 10 listeners to join our Patreon for $10,000 a year.
What?
We're making a living, friend.
Okay, I got an easier path. Those 10 listeners, tell 10 people you know about the show, and then we can grow from there.
Yeah, it's probably easier for them.
You don't want to extort $10,000 a year
or
those people.
Like the expedites.
We still have to split that, by the way.
I'm comfortable living on 50 grand.
It won't be 50 grand. We got to split it between us and between our initial investor.
Who's that?
Walgreens.
What?
And they're going to take 90%.
I hate Walgreens.
Yeah, don't you? We can't legally say that. Allegedly, you hate Walgreens.
Allegedly, I'm upset with Walgreens for what they've done to my family. But then again, I'm not allowed to go further than that.
Then again, where am I going to get chapstick and 6-year-old Reese's in the same store?
Anyway,
we're going to check my blood pressure and get hard candies made in 1990 at the same place.
It's my one-stop shop.
I call that the sad dad store.
Walgreens?
Yeah. Which, yeah,
that fits.
I don't want to alienate our listeners, but I feel like it's a certain trope. There's a dad that misses an anniversary or a birthday or whatever. They always end up in Walgreens.
Gotta walk through a Walgreens to find something.
Everywhere else is closed. They thought about it too late. It's like 11:30 at night. They got to go to Walgreens to figure it out.
They had to go anyways to pick up a prescription.
Yeah, for being an idiot.
Sad dad story. I'm gonna think about how sad of a dad I'll be when I'm in Walgreens the next time.
Well, you might be the next time. Hopefully you're not a dad that quickly the next time, because you could go to Walgreens any moment, right?
That's true.
So, think about your life.
Well, cool. But yeah, we're excited to get back to recording some content for you guys and recording some information, some learning.
Information like the content in today's episode.
You've been building this up for me for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I have.
And I have no idea what we're about to talk about.
Well, I'm pumped. And so if you want to talk chit-chat about other stuff, I'm happy to do that. But if not, I'm down to get down to it.
No, I got nothing else. I came here to talk about this.
You came here to talk about deep diving.
Deep diving?
Yeah.
Like deep water,
like deep water diving.
Like scuba diving? Or you're talking like you jump from a high cliff?
No, well, it includes scuba, but it also includes
like free diving?
No, not free diving.
Oh, okay.
Which I was going to look maybe we'll have to pause and then we can look up and see what the deepest free dive accomplished was. But
It's a long ways, man.
Um,
that would be a fun episode.
that probably should be its own episode, really.
Should.
Because all of this stuff was super fascinating. And this was a way, I mean, like I say every time, there was way more to this than I thought there was.
There always is.
Because I've been on kind of an adventure kick, you know what I mean? And the last episode I presented on was K2. And so I've just been thinking about like, where on earth are there conditions that are so extreme that very few people have been witness of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so deep water diving kind of came up. So it includes kind of everything.
My ex's house is one of those places as well.
Yeah, very few
Conditions are so extreme.
so extreme.
And cold.
Yeah, very cold. Yeah. Very few men survive. Well, now I lost my train of thought.
Talking about extreme conditions and extreme places that people have gone to.
Yeah, so it's it's deep. It's diving in the ocean with some kind of breathing apparatus, whether or not that's scuba, which is self-contained, or like surface supplied air or whatever.
Okay.
So it kind of covers all that stuff. You want to talk about it?
Let's go, baby.
Because there's way more to it, and this is going to end up being kind of a very in-depth. I tried to dumb some of it down a little bit so we didn't get too caught up in the weeds of some of the minutia of it, but it's going to be kind of in-depth medical and physiological heavy episode.
And water.
And water. So if you don't like physiological descriptions, metaphors, or anything to do with water, you might want to hit pause now and go back and listen to one of our many other fantastic episodes.
Like the Mellified Man.
The very first one we did, yeah. Great Molasses Flood is a great one too from the beginning.
They're all great.
They're all great. And let us know which ones you hate. So, yeah. So, I mean, there's a kind of a call right out of the gate. We talk about a lot of different kind of disturbing medical conditions associated with being in the deep ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, listen with care. If you're already predisposed to not liking deep water, pass on this one.
If you were alive in the 70s and saw Jaws when it came out, you may not want to watch listen to this one.
Yeah, because getting eaten by huge sharks is a symptom of deep diving. Is a symptom. I want to bring you back to, so pretty recently we were hanging out with Ben, who is our co-host of another show called Third Row Critics we do, which you should go check out if you haven't.
If you like movies.
If you love movies. We talk about movies. But he was talking to us about, we're all from Utah, and he was talking to us about some billionaire construction magnate who built this crazy swimming pool in his backyard.
Yeah.
And it's got like filled up, it kind of looks like a regular pool. And there's one side that's kind of a shallow end or whatever. And then there's one side that's, what was it, like 25 feet deep or something?
I can't remember exactly how deep it was, but it was deep enough that you could get your like first level scuba certification. Something like that.
Because he was going to like teach classes out of his backyard.
Yeah.
And we were looking at this, and Ben showed us the video, and we're watching this whole thing be built. It was kind of an amazing feat in and of itself. But then there's a point where they fill the water up, and then the dude films his son taking like the first dive into it. And collectively, we all had this moment of like, ooh, that's like a lot of water.
It's actually really deep.
Yeah. So I want you to think about that, and then multiply it by 1,000. So,
Yikes.
Because that's kind of what we're talking about today.
Well, I'm going to think about that the next time I'm on a cruise.
Yeah, please do. So, because that pool would have been just short of 10 meters, right? 10 meters is around 30-ish feet. So, that pool would have been just around 10. And the depths that we're going to be talking about today are upwards of 300 plus.
Meters?
Oh,
my goodness.
Yeah. So deep diving is kind of defined differently depending on which regulatory body you're talking about for scuba diving, or which kind of depth you're talking about, or what application you're talking about, right?
Okay, sure.
Generally speaking, if it's recreational diving, it's considered deep diving at about 18 to 30 meters.
Okay.
Which is, I wrote down the foot conversion on everything except for this one part, but that would be like, I don't know, like 60 to
100 feet.
60 to 100 feet.
Which that's pretty deep.
Yeah. Technical diving is not necessarily recreational. I mean, if you're a technical diver, you've gone through, you might not be commercial and you might not be military. You could be, but you're someone who's gotten various certifications to build up your expertise and ability to dive in more more extreme conditions, right? So technical diving is considered deep when you're around 60 meters, so about 200 feet. And then professional or commercial diving can extend to hundreds of meters with specialized equipment, and that's considered deep there. There are a ton of physiological symptoms, really negative physiological and medical conditions
Oh, sure.
that accompany deep diving, both on the way down as you're descending and on the way up, right? We're going to talk about like 7 of them because they're all super fascinating. But
Yeah.
notably, the one that what affects divers probably the worst and the most is nitrogen,
Okay, yeah.
right? They call that an inert gas. So inert means it's not something that supports like the physiological processes in your body like oxygen might, but it's something that is part of the cocktail of air that we breathe.
Right.
So, but nitrogen can cause quite a few problems, like nitrogen narcosis, which starts to affect a diver when they hit around 30 meters, 100 feet.
So is this having too much nitrogen
Well, we're going to get
in
into
the air
it.
supply? Okay.
So I want to bring them up here because I just want to demonstrate, like when we're talking about diving at depth, like some of these major conditions are clear and present dangers when you're diving at these depths, regardless. Like, and the deeper you go, as we'll talk about, the more under a magnifying glass, every single decision you make and every single thing you do has the potential to end your life, basically,
Sure.
the deeper you go.
Yeah, really ruin your day.
Really, at best. So nitrogen narcosis is a pretty bad condition we'll talk about. It starts to affect a diver around 30 meters and then gets worse and worse as you go. Oxygen toxicity will affect a diver at below 60 meters, 200 feet. And then the bends, which are pretty infamous, affect.
That's probably the more common one that people have heard of, if they've heard of one, right?
And we'll talk about what it is and how it affects your body and stuff. But that one affects basically all divers who dive at depth. And it has to do with how you're ascending, right? Versus the other ones, the first 2 we talked about, and most of the ones we'll talk about are things that happen to you when you're at depth.
Okay.
And the bends is kind of the main one that happens when you're coming back up. For commercial applications, special, they call it hypoxic breathing gases must be used. So we're going to talk a lot about this later on, but essentially nitrogen and oxygen cause significant problems at pressure, under pressure, right? And so the deeper you go, you'll develop certain cocktails of different gases and certain percentages of oxygen and stuff that will enable you to go deeper with fewer conditions that will affect you later.
Okay.
And they call those hypoxic breathing gases. Just know for now, it's the general term for like a different cocktail, a different recipe of gases that you can use that they've tested and shown positive results at depth.
Yeah.
Or if you want to go really deep, you can also use an atmospheric diving suit, which we'll talk about, which is essentially just like a personal submarine. And that was used in 2006 to set a dive record at 610 meters.
Whoa.
Which is 2,000 feet. So let's jump right into problems unique to deep diving.
Yes.
I'd mentioned earlier that nitrogen is kind of a big issue kind of across the board. So we'll start with the first one, which is termed as rapture of the deep.
Oh my gosh. That's what the problem's called?
Yeah, it's kind of the common name for it.
Yikes.
So that's nitrogen narcosis. So generally, there's not like hard science on this one. There's a pretty good common consensus, but some of the details, the fine details, there still are not quite sure about. But it's generally believed to affect a diver as the nitrogen molecules interact with neural membranes in the brain under pressure. So
Okay, so it's nitrogen that's already there. But
Yeah.
because the change in pressure is causing a reaction inside of the brain.
yeah, so the increased pressure
Okay.
is causing the nitrogen molecules to interact with the brain in a different way.
Interesting.
Because the nitrogen is present, unless you remove the nitrogen from your breathing gas that you're using at depth, then this is a concern that will happen if you're deep diving.
Yeah.
And nitrogen is in the air. I mean, it's like 78% of the air we breathe now.
Yeah, it's a large portion of
Huge
what
portion.
we breathe.
So essentially, under pressure, molecules of nitrogen dissolve into the fatty membranes of neurons. So you have a neuron, not to go crazy deep into the science, but you have a neuron, and then there's fatty portions on a neuron, kind of on the stalk of the neuron, called the myelin sheath. So
Yep.
those are kind of fatty membranes there. And so they believe that the molecules of nitrogen dissolve into those fatty membranes, and they cause a whole ton of problems, which we won't really talk about. But the main one is that it affects the normal flow of neurotransmitters as they're going through neurons in the brain. I mean, the myelin sheath also is part of the mechanism in a neuron that enables neural like synapses and connections and transmitters to happen at super fast speeds, because it kind of, as something travels through a neuron, because of the way that the physiological structure of the neuron is with the myelin sheath, it's kind of like in sections. And so a neuron will like effectively bounce through the transmitter, will like bounce through those really fast because of how it's constructed, right?
Right.
So if it's full of nitrogen molecules, it kind of inhibits the flow of those neurotransmitters and slows a lot of things down. So, and this is all very high level, by the way. I'm sure we got some of that wrong just now, but speaking very high level, it will slow down the functions of your brain on a molecular level. So at depth, it will start to impair things like cognitive functions, judgment, memory, reasoning. That will follow with more severe symptoms like motor coordination. And then really severe is loss of consciousness. Right. I have a side note here that helium is often used in deep diving mixes because the molecules are smaller, like physically smaller than nitrogen. And so it can't cause some of these same disruptions. Yeah. But there's a whole different set of...
And then there's more problems you're creating.
Well, it's just a different physiological condition associated with helium.
Yeah.
But it's at, I think, I'll have to correct myself when we get into it later, but I believe it's at 500 plus feet.
Wow.
That you can start to deal with bad stuff with helium. So for nitrogen, they have another common name is the Martini effect. So it's the idea that for every 10 meters you dive, every 30-ish feet you dive, it's like drinking a martini on an empty stomach.
Oof.
Because the nitrogen narcosis affects your brain and your body in strikingly similar ways to alcohol.
Yeah. At only 30 feet.
At only 30 feet it starts to. So you'll get kind of from 30 to 40 feet, you'll get kind of like mild euphoria. You'll get confidence, improved confidence, delayed reaction time.
Confidence with women.
Yeah. Look out. And then
look out for me underwater. I take that back. I love my wife. Continue.
All right. 40 to 50 feet, you get significant delays in responses to stimuli. You have auditory and visual impairments as well. Reasoning and judgment become impaired, and overconfidence starts to occur. Just like alcohol.
That's my limit.
Yep. 50 to 60 meters, you get a severe delay in reaction time.
You're talking meters or feet?
Meters.
Okay.
You get a severe, so this is like 190 or 170 to 200 feet.
Yeah.
You get severe delays in reaction time, confusion, drowsiness, hallucinations, short-term memory impairment. And then beyond 60 meters, you start to have the potential for severe impairment of judgment, loss of consciousness, inability to perform basic function. So the reason nitrogen narcosis is so dangerous is that it impairs judgment while simultaneously creating a false sense of security.
Wow. Just like alcohol.
Yep. So the diver doesn't even realize they've been affected.
Interesting.
And then it can cause fatal errors, right? I mean, I mentioned earlier that the deeper you go, the everything you do is under a bigger magnifying glass, right? Yeah. So any choice you make can end up in your death. But
gosh,
the other kind of crazy thing about nitrogen narcosis is that there's no amount of resistance training or tolerance training that can improve your reaction to it. It will be just as bad every single time you dive at depth.
Oh, really? It's not like you become accustomed to it the more you do it?
Nope.
Ooh.
So it's something that's always on the horizon. We'll I have the bends as the next one, but I want to come back to the bends because it's different than all the rest of these.
Because it's boring.
Bone degeneration is the next one.
Bone degeneration underwater? No way.
Yeah. So the technical term for it is dysbaric osteonecrosis. And it's essentially when gas bubbles form inside the bones, usually in the upper arm or thigh. And in very plain terms, because it was much more technical, high pressure nitrogen bubbles form inside your bone marrow and then cause bone tissue death.
Whoa.
Because it blocks blood vessels supplying that part of the bone. So it causes that part of the bone marrow to die, and then over time leads to a collapse of that bone area.
That's crazy.
Yeah. This kind of thing doesn't happen as immediate as the other symptoms here. So the risk is heightened for bone degeneration with repeated exposure to pressures greater than 2 atmospheres.
Okay. Wow.
And then if you have,
Underwater, that's not that deep. Man.
No, it's not. And so if you have poor decompression practices and you don't have like strict adherence to that kind of stuff. If you have a long-term diving career or a history of decompression sickness, your risk for bone degeneration goes way up.
Golly.
But the good news is it can be pretty much avoided straight up by limiting exposure to high pressure, which is hard to do if you're a diver, strict adherence to decompression schedules, and then using the correct gas mixtures for deep dives can really help. I got the sense from the article that it didn't, like, the danger of this doesn't ever really go away straight up.
Sure.
You can just kind of improve your outlook on it.
Sure.
You want to keep going? You need to take a break?
No, I can keep going.
Let's do a couple more, huh?
Which, real quick, this is, I thought at one point in my life, like, yeah, it'd be cool to try scuba diving, but all of this is quickly turning me away from it.
Well, I did look up, like, the vast majority of...
And I also want to say, you're not going to change my mind now.
Because if it's not these sicknesses, it's sharks.
I don't want my bones to stop growing.
No, they'll just collapse. It's different.
Oh, even better.
I did look up, like, the vast majority of known sea life lives within the top, like, 200 meters of the ocean.
Right.
So you don't have to go deep to enjoy what the ocean has to offer.
Yeah, see a lot of it.
To see your death staring at you.
Oh, what?
Yeah. Oxygen toxicity.
I love this show.
So this one occurs when you're breathing oxygen under pressure. And it seemed like from the article straight up across the board, it can occur when you're breathing oxygen under pressure. This one's a little bit scary. So there's 2 types. There's one that affects divers in the short term, and then there's a kind that affects divers in the long term. The short term, so it's essentially the oxygen as it's under pressure is causing literal physical damage to your body and your cells, your lungs and your cells, right?
Interesting.
So symptoms can include twitching, nausea, dizziness, irritability, ringing in your ears, tunnel vision, and then seizures and convulsions, which are more often than not fatal underwater if you have seizures or convulsions.
Yeah.
The long-term type includes chest pain, coughing, shortness of breath, reduced lung capacity, and inflammation.
None of which is good. We want our listeners to understand that.
Yeah, I thought that went without saying, but I'm glad that...
we need to make sure we say it. My brother listens to this podcast.
Yeah, and he doesn't know. He might think that was a good thing.
Oh, man.
Okay, so hydrogen narcosis. Maybe we'll get through all the narcosises and then we can take a quick snap. So this one's not as common. So I mentioned that they use different mixtures of gas to deal with depth because nitrogen is so detrimental, and then certain concentrations of oxygen can also be detrimental.
As it turns out.
So, and we'll talk more about this later, but really it's because as you go deeper, air compresses, and so you're breathing compressed air, which means you're breathing a higher volume of gas molecules into your body.
A higher density.
Which takes more effort, and it introduces more gas into your bloodstream and your body in general, right?
Right.
So that's where all this stuff comes from. So they have tried to mix different cocktails of gas to try and avoid the detrimental effects of these. And so this one's really not common today. They use helium a lot in mixtures today, and we'll talk about why later, but they used to use hydrogen as a substitute for helium because it was less expensive. But it turns out hydrogen narcosis is a thing, which basically is all the symptoms of nitrogen narcosis, but about 25% worse and more severe.
Oh, yikes.
At the same pressures as nitrogen narcosis would occur. So they really don't use it now, but it's mentioned on the thing for sure. Why don't we take a quick break, and then we can come back and talk more about how you'll die underwater.
Now is a perfect time.
Great. Should we jump back into it?
We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're breathing fine.
So just to remind our listeners, we're talking about ways you can die underwater.
Yes.
Not the ways you think.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned one shark attack.
No, not yet. Actually, we won't for the whole episode.
Yeah,
so.
And there's still ways you can die underwater.
We can escape from that. So I want to talk about there's a couple more kind of unique physiological conditions you can get, right? So I mentioned this one earlier, but it's called, the official name is high pressure nervous syndrome. So it's caused by diving below 150 meters, which is 500 feet, with a breathing gas containing helium.
Okay.
Right. So I mentioned earlier that they use helium, and actually I should have switched up the order I do this, but they use helium because it's so much lighter and it's easier to breathe, so that when it's compressed, it's easier on your body to breathe it physically.
Yeah.
Right.
So they try and switch it out for nitrogen.
Yeah.
In some of these mixtures.
Right. Or not switch it out wholly. Well, I'm not totally sure.
Or make it at least
a higher concentration to kind of replace it.
But from what you said, it sounds like it comes with its own set of problems.
Yeah, if you're going crazy deep. So if you're more than 500 feet with a gas containing helium, you get symptoms like tremors, muscle joint twitching, somnolence, which is the deep desire to sleep.
Underwater?
Underwater.
Yeah, no thanks, man.
Or visual disturbances, nausea, dizziness, and decreased mental performance. So this is interesting because it's affected by both the speed of compression, how fast you're diving, but then also the absolute pressure at depth. So compression effects might start around 500 feet, but then if you stay at 500 feet, if you're getting some of these symptoms and you stay there, once the pressure stabilizes for you, then the effects will go away.
Wow. Which 500 feet is so deep underwater.
It's very, very deep underwater. No one can hear you scream.
Yeah,
that's pretty deep. That's pretty freaking deep.
So that's a depth that not many of us will ever get to, because that's.
I hope not. Yeah.
Because at that point you're at like a professional commercial level dive. Is that right?
Well,
I'm trying to remember the kind of the ranges you gave.
Yeah, the ranges kind of get blown out of the water a little bit. No pun intended. Get out of the water a little bit when we start talking about people trying to hit world records and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, when I say a little bit, I really mean a little bit, because the amount of people who've dove at depth, like with scuba apparatus and stuff, is like shockingly few. It's like 26 people or something.
Really?
Yeah. And I have that statistic at some point. I can't remember exactly. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But so with this helium, what do we call it? The high pressure nervous syndrome. So 500 feet, if you stabilize, then some of these symptoms will go away. But I mentioned that it's affected by both the speed of compression and absolute pressure. So if you get up to around 1,000 feet, which would only affect, there's no recreational diver that's gone that, well,
that's gone that deep.
I can't remember.
While alive.
There's one guy, well, that's really true, but I can't remember for sure if there's one guy that's been close to that. I think he's been under 1,000 feet. But if you go below 1,000 feet, which is going to be a commercial diving apparatus, that's going to be with surface supplied air or with a diving suit. And you get that syndrome, the effects of that will remain regardless how long you stay at that depth.
Oh my goodness.
So all of these symptoms are reversible when you get back up to shallower water. They completely go away once you get back up into shallow water. But if you're that deep, then getting back up to shallow water is going to be quite like an multi-hour long process.
Yeah.
If you're doing it right. Or if you're doing it wrong, really, really fast. Really fast. And then your body explodes. Hypercapnia. So I mentioned this one was probably the craziest, probably like the fact of the episode for me. So I mentioned that at depth, air is more dense, it's harder to breathe, and it causes more exertion, which leads to a buildup of carbon dioxide in the blood.
Sure.
So I want to explain this a little more. So if you're 50 meters deep, then the air pressure is 6 times the amount that it would be at the surface. You use 6 times more air than you would at the surface.
Wow.
That means each breath you breathe contains 6 times more gas molecules.
Just because of how pressurized the oxygen is.
How pressurized all those gases are. Yeah.
It's not that you're using that because your body needs that, but because it's so dense. The same breath you would take at surface that you're taking underwater is bringing in 6 times the amount of air.
Correct, yeah.
And you might feel great for a second, but it sounds like...
You won't, though, because... The air is so much more dense. It's described as breathing syrup instead of air.
That's so weird
because it's so dense.
That's crazy.
The only thing I can even compare that to is like if you're in a place that's super humid and then you're driving in a car with AC and then you just get out really fast and you get smacked in the throat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. Well, I was just thinking like whenever I go to a place, because we live in Utah, so we're at a really high elevation, right?
Yeah,
and
that's true. Yeah.
And no humidity. I mean... Well, I guess this is related but unrelated, but like you go to a place that's at sea level,
Yeah.
and you can feel the difference of the amount you're breathing in. You know,
For
what I
sure.
mean?
Yeah.
Except when I go to sea level, I forget that I'm chubby for a little bit, but
Because you feel awesome.
because I feel fantastic and I can hike and I can run with friends,
And I have friends all of a
and I
sudden.
have friends
Yeah.
and they're there.
People like me.
But it sounds like it's much worse underwater.
Yeah, it's kind of a it's positive and then swings negative really quick.
Yeah, real quick.
Yeah.
It sounds like breathing syrup. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird
Where you can like breathe and sense how thick the air is.
Mm-hmm.
That was the point I was trying to make. You can sense the more air that you're breathing in when you're at sea level.
Yeah.
Compared to higher elevations.
So this is hypercapnia, right? So it's because it's so dense, you kind of have a couple of things working against you now. You're breathing basically syrup air. So your lungs are working way harder to move that really dense air.
Oh yeah.
And then it's way more difficult to fully exhale. So you start to build up this kind of cycle that you're not fully exhaling, and then you're leaving more and more CO2 behind because it's so tiring to fully exhale. So more CO2 built up in the blood. So CO2 reacts with water in your blood to form an acid, which makes it increases the acidity of your blood as more CO2 is present in your bloodstream, right? Mm-hmm. This causes increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, confusion, impaired thinking, anxiety, panic, muscle twitching, headaches, and eventually loss of consciousness. And these, like with other ones, these symptoms come on gradually, so it makes it pretty difficult to identify that it's happening to you. And if you try and increase the rate of your breathing to get rid of the excess CO2, then all you do is use up your air faster, which is under compression. And so you're literally using it faster than you would if you were at the surface because you're breathing more of it.
Wow.
So it's kind of a vicious, really kind of a
Not
vicious
meant
thing.
what your body was not meant designed for that.
No, not designed for breathing 500 feet under the ocean.
Gosh.
You're correct.
So that dispels the Atlantis myth.
Yeah, once and for all.
It's the main goal of this podcast is just breaking down false beliefs
Just that belief in particular.
through Wikipedia.
Yeah, just Atlantis. Gosh, we hate Atlantis. I'm tired of hearing about it. Tired of watching movies about it. That one animated movie can burn in hell.
I want it to be real so bad. And it lied.
So far we've kind of talked about all these conditions that happen when you're going down. And now I want to talk about what happens when you're coming back up. Mm-hmm. Specifically the bends.
Which this is the one we've been waiting for.
It's the magic ticket, folks, to your death at the surface.
It's the one you've all seen a movie where someone gets it.
Yeah. And it's probably worse in real life than it would ever be
true.
in the movie. So it's the technical term is decompression sickness, and it's in very plain terms, it's from ascending too rapidly from depth. Basically, it's kind of the opposite is working against you. So we talked about how if you're like 50 meters deep, air is, or what you're breathing is 6 times more dense. So you're breathing in 6 times the amount of air with every breath. So as you're going back up, like you're down there breathing and when exploring or working or whatever it is you're doing down there, and then you start ascending, then you have an insane excess of gas inside your body.
Sure.
That you wouldn't have had if you were at the surface. And it's expanding because because the pressure is getting less and less as you go up.
Yeah.
So if you go too fast, then the pressure decreases, and then the gases in your blood and tissues, like nitrogen, will expand. And then as these bubbles expand, they're causing physical, literal damage to the tissues that they're in.
They're stretching it out. They're tearing it, I'm sure.
All kinds of stuff.
Creating air. Gosh, if it's all in your bloodstream too, then it's creating bubbles and pockets of air in your blood.
Yeah.
Which we know that's not good.
Yeah, for Mitch's brother, that's not great. Yeah, look out for that.
I hope you're paying attention, brother.
Yeah, don't breathe underwater. And if you get bubbles in your bloodstream, that's also bad. Okay, so obviously that will cause potentially severe damage to, and even death to tissues within the body, right? So I think of it like cracking a soda open. So if you just barely crack a soda open and you get that and you just let it kind of off gas a little bit, then you can fully crack it and drink it without it exploding. But if you shake one up and then pop it really fast, those gases are trying to escape really rapidly.
Yeah.
And it's going to overflow and cause a great big old mess.
Big old mess.
Where the mess in this analogy are your blood and guts.
Oh, yikes.
Underneath the water, which the sharks will come and eat.
Oh, then that's when you die.
Yeah, that's
from the sharks.
That's what attracts sharks.
Oh, the bends.
Your body exploding underwater.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
The bends attract sharks.
Obviously, the effects of the bends vary super widely depending on the depth, the type of breathing gas that you're using. But by and large, most of the really severe effects happen after you've reached the surface.
Yeah.
So they call it the bends because people who experience this are in such excruciating pain, they're literally bent over.
Oh, bends.
Bend. Yeah, B-E-N-D.
Oh, okay.
I kind of thought, well, this is going to make me sound stupid, but before I thought this, I thought it was B-E-N-Z, like a Mercedes-Benz.
100% I did too.
You get the same excruciating feelings driving one of those or seeing someone drive one.
I was having to take it into the take a Mercedes into a mechanic.
Yeah, no kidding. Or deal with someone who drives one. Not a fun experience either way.
Okay, the bends.
So in some cases, if the person if they don't have time to ascend rapidly, and in certain applications like military diving, they plan for this on purpose. If they have to get in and get out, kind of a thing, and so they'll have hyperbaric chambers on the surface ready to receive the diver, right?
Oh,
so the hyperbaric chamber will serve as their staging area for them to go through decompression stops, which I don't think I even talked about that. But the idea is that if you're at depth, then you'll have, depending on how deep you go or whatever, there's a science to the whole thing and how many stops you have to take and how long you have to wait. But essentially you're stopping at a certain depth as you go up. So if you're at 100 meters and then you'll stop at, 90 meters and then wait for a certain amount of time to equalize there and let the pressures and the gases off gas the way they should. And then you'll go to 80 and then go to, 50 and then 40 and then whatever.
right.
And you have to do it for the correct amount of time at the correct depth to avoid decompression sickness. So they can kind of mirror that with a hyperbaric chamber on the surface. But the tricky part with that is that the diver has like literally less than 5 minutes to get from the water into that chamber.
Yeah.
And I didn't do a ton of research about this part of hyperbaric chambers, but my understanding from other reading is that they are not, it's not like a bank vault door, right? That you're just opening with a big latch and then you put the person in and then close it and tighten the thing over and you call it a day and wash your hands or whatever. Like these are under such intense pressure on the surface now. They require like many bolts to be bolted in. Like you're literally sealing somebody in there.
Yeah.
So it takes like a team of people working it. So
yeah. Plus, who has a rollaway hyperbaric chamber that's just so easily mobile like that?
Yeah, the rollaway hyperbaric chamber.
The United States government, apparently.
Yeah.
The Navy.
They invented them. Yeah. You can get them at a rent-a-center if you're careful.
I think Biden sleeps in one.
He might. Yikes.
And Trump's going to keep it.
What?
He wants to sleep in it now, too.
All right. Glad we finally broke the seal on this. We're finally a political podcast. Let's hear your
We make fun
opinion.
of both parties.
All right. Where were we? So the hyperbaric chamber. So in some cases they can use that. But they have literally within 5 minutes to get in there. And so it's kind of they have to have the right thing in the right place with the right people ready to staff it.
Yeah.
And they have to get in there and get it pressurized or else, they could die. But even if they use a hyperbaric chamber and they do all the things right within the right timing, then there's still no guarantee that they won't experience permanent damage.
Oh, for sure.
So the bends can safely be avoided by ascending at a slow rate to off-gas the air bubbles and allow them to dissipate before they grow in size and cause damage. Mm-hmm. That's the whole thing.
Just a slow ascent to reacclimate to the pressure.
It's knowing where your stops are and how long each stop needs to be taken.
Is it kind of like
your way up.
Is it kind of like you stop at each point for a minimum amount of time? Okay.
Yeah.
Rather
I kind of
than
view it as like
you have a window.
There's
you've got to
no
be there for at least this amount of time.
Yeah. That's the way I understand it. And there's no limit to how quickly you can dive down. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk about some really extreme dives on the back half of this podcast, but they'll pretty much, if you're talking about diving to like 800 feet or whatever, you have a very short amount of time at the bottom to do whatever you're going to do, because you only have a certain amount of air and and we'll talk about all the strategies they use to maximize that. But you essentially have like minutes at the very bottom to do whatever it is you're going to do before you have to start ascending, because your air is a constraint.
Yeah.
So you dive down as quickly as possible, then you do what you're going to do, and then you immediately start decompression going up. And so I view it as like a rungs of a ladder. So like you're diving down, and that's when you grab the sides of the ladder and just like slide down it clear to the bottom.
Oh, sure.
And then as you're decompressing, you're just stepping one ladder rung at a time and waiting, stepping another one up and waiting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. So that's the bends. Any questions about all these various sicknesses?
No, I'm going to stay away from them.
You know what else we should stay away from?
What's that?
Talking too long without a break, baby.
Let's take a quick one.
All right. Okay, we've been talking for 3 hours. You ready to keep going?
Yep.
Okay, so we talked about what deep diving is and what kind of things it will do to your body in a damaging way, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the strategies that these divers use in terms of what tools they use and like what procedures they use to try and combat some of these things.
Okay.
Right? So equipment that's pretty much widely used in deep diving, well, this comes with a caveat that everything varies wildly with
of course
the type of gas you're using and how deep you're going to go, right? So generally, though, there's a few common things like compressed tanks of gas or air, right? Scuba tank. Rebreathers are a common one, which a rebreather just scrubs out the CO2 and what you're exhaling and then introduces a small amount of oxygen back into the air and kind of recycles the air.
Okay.
So they don't have some of the same problems that compressed air tanks do, but they have a whole different set of like procedures and potential failure points.
Okay.
That make them dangerous in a whole different way.
Yeah.
And people have tried, there's like world records of deep dives using rebreathers. Just like with anything else, but it seems from the reading, it seems like it's more dangerous.
Yeah.
So we've got those, a diving line. So there'll be a weighted diving line that goes clear down to where it is they're going to go. So they have like a visual thing and a physical thing that will help guide them down to where they're supposed to be, right? So they're not just aimlessly like...
Right.
Because when you get down far enough, like light, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but the depth at which light can't penetrate ocean water anymore or water in general is, I think, like 3,500 feet or something.
Okay, which that's pretty deep.
That's really deep.
It's deeper than I thought.
And none of what we're going to talk about is going to hit that deep, but I mean, we're getting halfway there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or 2/3 of the way there in a couple of cases. So like there's not as much light as you get at the surface for sure.
And it's going to be, while there might be light, it's going to be darker and darker the farther down
as you go. Yeah. So, and it would be really easy to get super disoriented when you get down there. So a dive line is pretty important. So usually you see decompression trapezes is what they call them. Mm-hmm. And it's just basically on your dive line, it's like a 90-degree line tied off with another buoy at the top. So you have the rope is a set spot at depth where you need to decompress. So you can hold on to that part of the rope and then wait your allotted time there. Mm-hmm. Decompression buoys is another thing. So they'll have like a kind of it looks like a big sock that is all rolled up, and then they'll shoot some of their air into it and fill it up, and then it shoots off to the surface, and then it lets the surface team know where the diver is, because they will have not, in some cases they won't have stayed exactly where they went into the water. So the surface team will need kind of an awareness of where they need to go. So, and then the other thing that's really common across the board is specialized mixtures of gas. So it's either with lower inert gases or lower percentages of oxygen or replacements like helium, that kind of stuff, right? So those are your common tools. Less common tools are going to involve things like hot water suits, which combat hypothermia when you're down that deep.
Oh, yeah.
Diving bells, which can be used to keep someone at pressure or at certain pressures as they're underwater. Lockout submersibles, which is kind of the same thing. I didn't get a lot of information about those. And then a breathing gas reclaim system, which again, that one was hard to find too, but essentially that one's for commercial applications. So I mentioned earlier that kind of the main difference between recreational or technical and then commercial is whether or not your air is with you or it's supplied from the surface. Mm-hmm. So a breathing gas reclaim system is kind of a rebreather, but from the surface.
Okay.
If they're using like a helium system. So it will scrub CO2 and reintroduce oxygen and helium mixtures as it goes back down to the diver from the surface.
Interesting.
And I'm sure that that's wrong because the article was really not very detailed about that. So take that for what it's worth. So pretty radical tools that you can use at depth involved. The most radical is an atmospheric diving suit. They call that an ADS. So it allows extreme diving due to a rigid articulated exoskeleton, which is sealed against water and can withstand extreme pressure. So it looks like a weird, like, I guess probably the closest analogy is maybe the love child between a spacesuit and a suit of armor.
Yeah.
So it's like it's articulated, so you have some joints that move. It's like a one-person submarine.
Interesting.
So it's a hard shell. You can move your arms and your head around or whatever, and it keeps the inside. It's pressurized, and it's dry. So on the inside, you're pressurized to the atmospheric pressure you had at the surface. But because it's sealed against water, it allows for extreme diving, and you can go down to like, I think they go to 2,300 feet.
Wow. Okay, that was my question. If that's the method that allows you to go to the deepest.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is. Yep.
That's pretty cool.
So past that, you need to get like an ROV underwater or
you need a
legit
bigger suit.
a submarine. Yeah.
Wow.
So, or you need millions and millions of dollars.
And an Xbox
to take
controller.
Dang it, you beat me to it.
Oh, my bad.
Yikes. People died, Mitch. Atmospheric diving suits are super expensive, by the way.
I'll bet they are.
So the nice parts about them is that they've removed the risk of pretty much every negative thing that we've talked about already in terms of like gas exposure and things that'll do your body. You do lose out on some mobility and dexterity because you're in this suit. Like it doesn't have like articulated fingers.
Sure, I'm guessing it's like a mitten.
No, not even that. It's like at least the pictures
like
I saw.
Stub hand.
It almost looks like in the movies when someone is supposed to lose an arm and then they get like a hook arm, but it's just like a cap on top of their hand, their real hand, and it's very obvious.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Okay, yeah.
So like the arm of it ends and then there's some kind of a claw or something that they're operating from within. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So you don't have like individual finger use. The other thing is that they're super expensive. Yeah. So I only found one figure when I was searching for this. It was not on Wikipedia, but the number
is like on eBay, like a used one?
Yeah, on Amazon. Yeah. It's on its way tomorrow. For $250,000.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was way over.
Very expensive.
Than what I was guessing.
I got the sense that there's like with anything, there's a sliding scale of expense.
Sure. Is the government funding your project or your neighbor?
I would imagine though that the ones that, if you're going to buy one that can only go to 500 feet,
oh, sure,
that would be probably far less expensive than the one that can go to 2,300 feet. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I'd hope so.
Or it's not operated with an Xbox controller and you're just crossing your fingers.
Less is not more for this one.
All right. So I also mentioned that there's some procedural things that they do to kind of combat dangerous activity within the deep. So by the way I kind of want to steer this is that we're going to talk about procedural things that they do different. And then I want to talk about ultra deep diving, the deepest of the deep, and then kind of some notable accidents and fatalities associated with these, with people who are attempting world records.
Yeah.
Right. So decompression is pretty much the critical thing across the board to help people. So it prevents the bends and it's controlled by various time stops depending on how deep the dive is and what the gas mixture you use is. Gas management is also really important. So if you're doing scuba is you're taking down all the air that you're going to breathe.
Right.
But if you're doing a big deep dive that goes down to like 700 or 800 meters or feet or whatever, you'd die. But if you're doing meters, but if you're doing feet, you'd want like some of what I saw. If people who are attempting world records in these will usually dive in like a sinkhole or a cenote because it's very controlled.
Sure.
So a cenote or the sinkholes, the ones we're going to talk about are in I think South Africa and Mexico, but essentially it's just a big column of water that's very deep. and you know a lot about what's going on in there. Like you will have probably explored it with an ROV at some point, or some university has.
Yeah.
You know pretty much what the temperatures of the water are going to be. You know what lives down there. You know the general direction of how the cavern is formed, right? And then there's, really importantly, there's not major currents that are happening inside there that are going to kind of put you in a different or a difficult situation. But sometimes when they do these attempts at world records with those, they'll throw their dive line down, and then on the dive line they've tied certain mixtures of compressed air in a tank. So as the diver descends, they'll switch out a tank for one that's tied to the dive line that has a certain mixture, and then they keep going down, and it will adapt as they go down. Right?
Oh, very cool.
So that's gas management. Rebreathers, I mentioned, can reduce gas supply, but they also increase complexity and risk, and they have way more failure points and more danger. And then this one I thought was really cool, saturation diving. So this is, from what I saw, it's pretty much strictly a commercial application. But if you're a commercial diver, you'll go down at depth. And if you're like at 1,000 feet or something, working on some oil rig or whatever it may be, if you're trying to get down there, like I mentioned earlier, that the deeper you go, the less time you have to do what you're going to do at the bottom.
Right.
Because it takes so long, like the deeper you go, the longer you have to take to decompress as you come back up.
Right.
So if these commercial divers go down and they're working on something, and like they go down to work on the thing and then decompress and come back up and then wait the amount of time they need to go back down again, like they're getting very little work time at the bottom. So instead, they'll take them down, and then they'll let their bodies saturate to the level that they're working at. And then they'll either live in an underwater habitat, or they'll live in a habitat on the surface that's at the same pressure as it is at the working level that they're working.
That's so
And then they'll come up in a dive bell that's pressurized up to the surface, go into their pressurized habitat at the surface, go back in the dive bell, back down to their work site.
Huh.
So the idea is that when they can do this up to 28 days.
Wow.
It seemed like that was the maximum. Like it was like not OSHA, but it was like OSHA saying you can't do this longer than 28 days.
Yeah.
I seriously doubt they go down that long, but it's like a couple of weeks at a time or whatever. And you can stay down either in your habitat under there or up at the surface. But then when you're done, you decompress one time.
Okay.
And so
rather than have to do it every day when you come back up.
Which not only saves massive time, but it also is way, way safer.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing it repeatedly.
Sure. It's less taxing on your body.
Yeah. And there's less room for, there's still room for error, but there's less room for error statistically because you're not decompressing 17 times.
Yeah.
You're just doing it once. Right?
Very cool.
All right. So you want to talk ultra deep diving?
Yes.
So this is where we kind of like tickle that funny bone for me that I was trying to find with K2, where we're talking about a very, very select group of people who have done these things. And specifically, we're going to talk about ultra deep scuba diving here.
Yeah. Because
the commercial diving, they go really deep with either surface applied gas or atmospheric diving suits, that's all really cool in its own right. But there's like the kind of the physical feat people are going after is scuba diving down to these depths because the dangers are super great. Not to the same depths that commercial divers are going to.
Okay.
It's not possible. But going to, 800, 900 feet.
Yeah.
Is what they're trying for because the physical exertion is so crazy. The dangers are so high. Like that's the record that they're going for. Right.
Right.
So just a refresher, technical scuba diving. This is where you have all of these certifications and technical certifications as a scuba diver. It's considered deep diving below 200 meters. Oh, no. Sorry. Ultra deep diving is below 200 meters.
Wow. Okay.
Which is about 650 feet, ultra deep diving.
Okay.
So probably goes without saying, but it requires super high levels of training, experience, discipline, fitness, and surface support. All of those things are super necessary.
Right.
Any one of those things, if you don't have, truly, you're taking your life and you're probably just not even taking your life in your hands. You're going to die, right?
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, only 26 people have ever been known to have dove to at least 240 meters.
Wow.
26 people ever.
Scuba equipment.
Right. Which
wow.
It's scuba equipment. They're still employing things like mixed gas ratios and things like that. They're still doing all of those things. But this is like either that you've strung a line with the air you're going to use, or you're taking the air you're going to use with you, kind of thing. Which, again, the article wasn't super clear, but my understanding of what I read is that it would be impossible based on how much air compresses and how rapidly you use it. It'd be impossible to reach any kind of major depth just with like a few tanks on your back. I think you have to string some down and then trade out tanks as you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, only 26 people have ever been known to dive to at least 240 meters, 790 feet on self-contained breathing apparatuses.
That is so far below the surface.
The holy grail mark of ultra deep scuba diving is 300 meters or 980 feet under the ocean surface.
Wow.
Which was first achieved by a man named John Bennett in 2001.
Wow.
Who since passed from
a diving accident,
diving
I'm sure.
accident, literally.
Gosh.
But since 2001, that 300 meter mark has been achieved 5 times since then. And these attempts, really, the only reason for you to go that far is to do deep cave exploration or to try and hit the record.
Yeah.
And that's literally it.
Yeah.
Because the amount of time you get at the bottom is so short, and compared to how long your decompression time is, it like I said, the deeper you go, the longer you have to decompress and the less time you have at the bottom. So, fatalities during record attempts.
Ooh.
The article, I mean, there are only 26 people that have ever gone deeper than 790 feet.
Yeah.
So Wikipedia lists out 11 different accidents that happened that were trying to hit some kind of a record. And not all of them went that deep. Some of them were just like, they were using a certain type of rebreather, a certain type of different like breathing apparatus to try and hit a record. And so they made it like 450 feet and perished. Or like not all of them hit that crazy. I mean, that's still crazy, but not all of them hit like, wild. Not all of them are competing with like they're
not all going for the same depth record.
Right. So the list had about 11 stories about folks dying on record attempts, but there were just really 2 that I wanted to talk about because of how crazy they were. So there's a man by the name of Sheck, S-H-E-C-K, Sheck Exley. So he's kind of a famous name in the deep diving game, and that rhymed. He set multiple records in his career, including some where he didn't really even mean to. Like sometimes they'll stage support, like surface support can mean literally on the surface, but also like they'll stage divers at certain depths.
Sure. So
as the person who's attempting the record attempts it, they'll have people supporting them and people swimming down with them to a certain depth. And then it's like at 500 feet, they are solo as they pursue their goal. And then they have someone who's at 500 feet waiting for them to return so they can kind of like support them as they go back up, kind of thing.
Right.
So Sheck did that. There was one story of him doing that. And then there are these 2 dudes. Being a support diver, yeah. And these 2 guys were trying to hit this record. And these 2 divers went down to 480 feet and died.
Oh my goodness.
And then Sheck was at 300 feet and tried to swim down to try and help them before they perished. But because they died and because he survived, he set a record inadvertently of deepest dive, right? So he passed away trying to reach the bottom of Zacatón, which is a thermal water-filled sinkhole in Mexico.
Whoa.
It's in... Dang it, I had you tell me how to pronounce this earlier. Tamaulipas, Mexico.
Yeah, sounds right.
So the sinkhole is 112 feet deep, right?
Wow.
And so Sheck and a guy named Jim Bowden, which is another pretty famous deep diver, tried to reach the bottom. There's a really cool... I'll send it to you so we can link it in the social medias, but there's a really cool YouTube video that shows... Gosh, I don't remember. I didn't write down when this was done. It was pre-2000s, but the video shows like them setting up their dive line, and they have like 30 tanks of compressed air, and they're like tying them to certain spots of the dive line and getting everything ready. And then it talks about like what they experience when they go down, because Jim and Sheck both tried to they were just trying to reach the bottom of this thing, 112 feet, 1,112 feet. But at a certain point, they were going together, but at a certain point, it's a solo endeavor, basically.
Right.
Because you have so many things working against you. You have to just focus on yourself. So I watched this whole thing. It was very interesting, but because Jim survived and Sheck did not, but Jim talks about like how he lost visuals and lost contact with Sheck, and then he made it to 282 meters, which is 925 feet.
Wow.
He made it 925 feet. He set a record doing that, by the way. But and then when he was coming back up, he thought for sure that Sheck should have beat him down, and then was coming back up, and then they realized that like he came clear up and realized that Sheck wasn't there, and
Oh man.
it was this whole thing. But so they assumed that Sheck died from high pressure nervous syndrome, which we talked about.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 268 to 276 meters, which is 880 to 906 feet.
Wow.
So the last one I want to talk about is pretty crazy. And it kind of ends, I guess, probably on a downer. So
Most accidents do.
So we'll see how this goes. So a man by the name of Dave Shaw. So in 1994, a different diver named Dion Dreyer died while he was trying to help a different dive team. So he was a support diver for this other dive team, Dion was, and he was ascending from a 50-meter, 164-foot dive and passed away. He was in this, I'm going to forget what it was called. The Bushman's Hole or something.
Okay.
I think that's what it was called. I think it's the Bushman's Hole. It's a sinkhole in South Africa, very similar to this other one. So he dies, and then they didn't recover his body, right?
Oh, okay. Wow.
So Dion was in there, and then Dave Shaw was diving in there and discovered his body 10 years later.
Oh, wow.
Right? So Dave mounted kind of this expedition to go recover Dion's body. And so Dion was wearing a dry suit. And after extensive conversations with experts, because they got visuals on Dion's body and they could see skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the experts were saying he's negatively buoyant because he's skeleton. Like, you're going to go down there, you got to tie him, rig him with some rope, and then you'll come back up and bring him, and he'll be negatively buoyant. So we need to account for that as you're decompressing.
Right.
The problem was, oh, by the way, I should say Dave Shaw discovered Dion's body at a depth of 270 meters.
Wow.
886 feet into this sinkhole. So the problem with the experts' opinion was that they were only talking about the visible parts of Dion's body, but the parts that were not visible, the parts that were still within the cloth of the dry suit, had been protected such that they had turned into, the body itself had turned into a substance called adipocere, also known commonly as corpse wax.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
it's essentially, I'm probably going to get it wrong. So like, lactic acid.
Mm-hmm.
So lactic acid is caused by bacteria buildup inside your muscles that is a non-oxygen breathing reaction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost positive about that. But it's a very similar reaction happening. So it's bacteria kind of like preserving and changing the structure, except not with muscle, but in this case, corpse wax. It's the bacteria that's non-oxygen breathing bacteria having a reaction with the fat in the body and then turning that fat into something else.
Okay.
Which is a very waxy type substance.
Yeah.
Which also happens to float. So
okay.
So it's
buoyant.
It's positively buoyant. So a bunch of things happened as Dave got down to this body. So he successfully went down there, and all of he videoed his own death basically.
Wow.
So he had a camera with him, which is how they kind of determined what happened to him. So he gets down to the body just fine, and then he's working on getting it out, but it's stuck in the silt at the bottom. So Dave starts working to try and get it out. And as we've talked about all these other things, we have a bunch of stuff start to happen with Dave. So he's exerting more energy. He's breathing air that's thick like syrup and exerting himself trying to dig this guy out of there. It's leading to heavy breathing. It causes hypercapnia, which is that high acidity due to increased CO2 in his bloodstream.
Uh-huh.
And then Dave kind of gets him out and then rigs him up on a rope. But because Dion's body was positively buoyant, it started to go up. And then Dave got caught up in the rigging and tied up in the rope, And he was so, and like the effort from exerting himself to dig out Dion, but then also trying to get himself untied, like he just was spent. He just was spent, you know what I mean? So that was all he could do. So, I mean, the positive end of that story is that they recovered both bodies as they were kind of pulling up rigging. So, I mean, at a very bare minimum, Dave didn't just have to be down 800 feet under the water for an unknown period of time either.
Yeah.
Or potentially cause damage or death to somebody else trying to come back and recover him.
Yeah.
But it just is such an example of like you're at that depth, and had Dave been doing the same motions trying to dig out a body on the surface, I mean, he could have taken a break and stuff or whatever, but like the amount of exertion he would have had to do the exact same thing wouldn't have been an issue.
Yeah.
But because he's at such extreme depth, breathing that air that is thick like syrup with a whole host of other issues that are currently happening to his body without his knowledge of them happening to his body, it just like things stack up and add up so quickly that's why this is such a dangerous endeavor.
Wow.
So,
wow.
So pretty cool. I mean, when we get into stuff that's like so many things can go wrong so quickly with such minute changes in how your environment is affecting you. I don't know, man. I like that stuff like hits a funny bone for me.
It's fascinating.
Very fascinating. Yeah. And then the kind of crazy folks that are trying to go out there and do this stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because this isn't something you're going to just decide to do one weekend.
These
are people who have been diving for,
it's a
20 years and have their stacked resume with certifications.
I was going to say it's a lifestyle. It's what they do. It's who they are.
Like it's decades.
And then they're
time.
Pushing the limits on even the best,
Yeah. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. Wow. Really fascinating stuff.
So
was that everything?
That's it, my friend.
Well, terribly tragic.
So if you get a chance, check out the Wikipedia page for this. Deep Diving is the Wikipedia page. We'll link it. And then there's always a see all. Well, not always. There's usually a see also section at the bottom of a Wikipedia page. So you can kind of expand yourself. And this one had a pretty extensive see also section. And if you're interested in it and you get a chance to go read through, like each one of those conditions I talked about has its own separate Wikipedia page associated with them. And so it'll go very in depth of what like the mechanism affecting the body is and how it's doing that on a molecular level. And that's super fascinating to me, but if you get a chance, it's super cool. So
very cool.
That's it, man.
Okay. Super cool. Well, be sure to check out some of our social media stuff on this. We'll be sharing some pictures and links to the articles and maybe videos.
Yeah, we'll try and catch that. I'll find that link to the video of Shek and Jim trying to tackle that sinkhole.
Yeah, that would be cool. So you guys can look us up on social media at Other Brothers Studios.
Yep.
Find us there.
Shoot us an email, hello@otherbrothers.studio. We welcome all your feedback. So go ahead and let us know. That's it, man.
That's all we got. We'll see you guys next week.
Okay, catch you next week. Unless you die in the water.